You're about to hear some fascinating stories behind 3 ordinary-looking nickels that could secretly be worth hundreds or even thousands of dollars. These aren't just curiosities for casual hobbyists. We're talking about rare variants with real market demand. Whether you're a longtime collector or someone who's held on to old change without realizing what you have, what you'll learn today could change the way you look at these familiar coins. Let's start with one that's quietly gained serious attention over the years: the 1977 Jefferson nickel. At first glance, the 1977 nickel seems pretty standard. It features the familiar left-facing profile of Thomas Jefferson on the obverse, designed by Felix Schlag, the same basic design that's been on the coin since 1938. On the reverse, we see Jefferson's iconic Monticello home, also Schlag's work. But what sets the 1977 version apart isn't the design. It's the condition and the errors. This coin was minted in Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco, but the ones turning heads today come primarily from Philadelphia and Denver. That's because in 1977, Philadelphia still hadn't adopted the P mint mark for nickels, so nickels from that mint are blank. Denver coins bear the D mint mark. The real intrigue comes from high-grade mint state examples and error varieties that have surfaced in the years since. One standout error is the 1977 D nickel struck on a penny planchet, a copper coin blank normally reserved for 1-cent pieces. These error coins weigh significantly less than a standard nickel, about 3.1 grams instead of 5.0, and the color's all wrong for a nickel. They have that reddish hue typical of copper. These are extremely rare and often discovered by accident, tucked away in personal collections or handed out in change. Auction records for 1977 D nickels struck on penny planchets show some strong prices. One sold for $1,500 back in 2017. And the values have only gone up as awareness of this error has spread. That's just one type of error. There are also off-center strikes, double dies, and even nickels struck on foreign coin planchets, leftovers from international contracts the U.S. Mint had at the time. If you come across one of these, especially in high grade, it could be a serious payday. Speaking of high grade, condition makes all the difference. A circulated 1977 nickel, the kind most people have in jars or drawers, typically won't bring more than face value. But if it's a clean, uncirculated piece with sharp details and original luster, it could sell for significantly more. In MS-67, a regular 1977 P. Jefferson nickel has fetched prices north of $300 in online auctions, simply because that grade is hard to find. At MS-68, you're in rare air. PCGS has graded only a handful at that level, and they command upwards of $800 or more. Now here's something most collectors appreciate. The 1977 nickels are relatively modern, which means they're often overlooked. They don't carry the old-school prestige of early 20th century coins, but that's exactly what makes them interesting. Collectors who specialize in modern errors or condition rarities know that these coins can be sleepers. Underappreciated but full of potential. They show that value isn't just about age. It's about scarcity within a specific grade or variety. Let's not forget, too, that Jefferson nickels were in massive circulation during the late 70s. Millions were minted, over 585 million in Philadelphia and more than 297 million in Denver. But mint state survivors with no bag marks, full steps on Monticello, and clean surfaces? That's another story entirely. The full steps designation, where you can clearly see all 6 steps leading up to Monticello on the reverse, is key. These examples bring a premium, often doubling or tripling the value of a high-grade coin. Interestingly, the San Francisco Mint only struck proof coins in 1977. These were never released into circulation and were sold directly to collectors. They're known for their mirror-like surfaces and sharp details, and while common in proof sets, ultra-high-grade proofs, PR70 Deep Cameo, still carry a decent premium. One sold for over $400 in recent years, not because it was rare overall, but because the grade was virtually flawless. If you're sifting through old change or even unopened rolls from the era, the 1977 nickel deserves a closer look. It's a textbook case of how modern-era coins, often dismissed as too recent to matter, can turn out to be surprisingly valuable. Whether you're looking for rare mint errors, top-tier condition, or those elusive full steps, the 1977 Jefferson nickel has something to offer serious collectors. Now, while the 1977 nickel is a fascinating blend of subtlety and hidden value, the next coin we'll explore is even stranger. A date that technically doesn't exist. Let's move on to one of the most famous ghost coins in U.S. numismatics. The mysterious 1975 Jefferson nickel. The story of the 1975 Jefferson nickel is one of confusion, myth, and a surprising twist of minting history. If you've ever gone hunting through your change expecting to find one, you're not alone. Collectors for decades have wondered, where are the 1975 nickels? The answer is deceptively simple, and once you understand why, it opens up a world of intriguing possibilities tied to this missing date. Here's the key fact. The U.S. Mint did not produce any nickels dated 1975. Not one. It wasn't an oversight or a production error. It was a deliberate decision driven by the nation's bicentennial celebration. In 1975 and 1976, the Mint created special reverse designs for quarters, half dollars, and dollar coins to commemorate the 200th anniversary of American independence. To avoid confusion and preserve the integrity of the celebration, all these coins bore the dual date, 1776 to 1976. But here's where it gets curious. The nickel wasn't part of the bicentennial redesign. The Jefferson nickel kept its regular reverse featuring Monticello. But despite that, the Mint still skipped over 1975 entirely. All the nickels minted during that year were dated 1974 or 1976, depending on when they were struck. So when you go digging through rolls or bags hoping to find a 1975 nickel, you're chasing a ghost. That date doesn't exist in the Jefferson nickel series, officially at least. Now, why is this interesting to collectors? Because this odd gap created a window for errors, transitional planchet strikes, and the ever-so-rare possibility of a mule, a coin struck with mismatched dies. While no confirmed authentic 1975 dated nickel has surfaced, the idea that one could exist is a numismatic fantasy that keeps collectors looking. There's also a parallel obsession with transitional errors from this period. For example, nickels dated 1974 but struck on planchets intended for the following year, or vice versa, can exist when leftover blanks are accidentally used. Transitional errors like that are exceedingly rare, but they have occurred in other denominations and years, so collectors stay vigilant when inspecting nickels from this era. Let's talk value. Because the 1975 nickel doesn't exist in circulation, its value lies in the mystique and in associated coins and anomalies. For example, a 1974 D nickel struck on a 1-cent planchet during 1975 conditions would be a jackpot. Similarly, an off-metal error or double denomination strike from the 1974 to 1976 window could be worth thousands. Even a 1976 nickel with a strong off-center strike or full steps designation can command several $100s at auction, and collectors are especially drawn to errors from this transitional time. Mint state nickels from 1974 and 1976 that could have been struck in 1975. Those that fill the production gap are now gaining attention. Coins with impeccable luster, no contact marks, and full Monticello steps can fetch high premiums, particularly in MS67 or better. We're talking auction sales in the $500 to $900 range for top condition examples. And again, proof coins from 1976, minted in San Francisco, hold even more appeal when they grade out at PR70 deep cameo. These aren't rare in terms of total mintage, but pristine examples are always in demand, and values reflect that. One of the more fascinating aspects of the 1975 non-nickel is how it's influenced collecting behavior. Entire subsets of Jefferson nickel collectors focus on transitional years, building sets around dates that were skipped or had unusual production quirks. For many, it's not about what was minted, but what wasn't, and why. There's also the rumor mill. Every so often, someone claims to have found a 1975 nickel. Maybe it was misread, misattributed, or a foreign coin that looks similar. But those rumors always turn up empty. No legitimate 1975 dated Jefferson nickel has ever been verified by PCGS or NGC. That hasn't stopped people from checking. And that's part of the fun. This is the kind of mystery that turns a hobby into a hunt. Think about it. How often do you find value in something that doesn't technically exist? That's the strange legacy of the 1975 Jefferson nickel. It's not about the coin you can hold in your hand. It's about the curiosity, the what-ifs, the near misses that fuel collecting passion. And in a hobby where surprise and discovery go hand in hand, that's as good as gold. Now we've looked at a coin that hides its value in error, and one that hides itself entirely. But next, we're heading back in time to explore a piece of American coinage that stood out even in its own era. It's time to talk about the rugged, wartime survivor, the 1940 Jefferson nickel. The 1940 Jefferson nickel holds a special place in U.S. numismatics, not just because of its age, but because of what it represents, a snapshot of America on the cusp of war, still reeling from the Great Depression and rapidly modernizing. The coin feels like a quiet witness to a country in transition. It was produced before wartime alloy changes kicked in, yet close enough to that era to give collectors a taste of the historical weight that was building. Let's start with the basics. The 1940 nickel was minted at Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco. It still carried Felix Schlag's now iconic design, Jefferson on the front and Monticello on the back. But this particular year is one of the more collectible early Jefferson nickels, especially when you dig into condition rarities, mint marks, and die varieties. From a mintage standpoint, the 1940 nickel isn't extremely scarce. Philadelphia struck over 176 million coins, Denver over 43 million, and San Francisco nearly 40 million. So at first glance, you might think it's a fairly common coin. And in lower circulated grades, that's true. You can find worn examples for $1 or $2. But the value explodes when you move into high-end uncirculated condition, particularly with full steps on Monticello and strong, clean fields. Let's break down the condition factor, because that's where the money is. In MS65 or higher, 1940 nickels with full steps, which means all the architectural steps on Monticello are crisp and complete, become much harder to find, especially from Denver and San Francisco. A 1940 D and MS67 full steps can bring in over $2,500 at auction. The Philadelphia examples are a bit more common, but even those can break the $1,000 mark in MS67 FS condition. What makes full steps so important? It's a quick way to measure strike quality. Most Jefferson nickels from the 30s and 40s were weakly struck, especially on the reverse. So when you find one where all 6 steps are visible and undisturbed, it signals a near-perfect coin, a gem not marred by the typical production shortcuts of the time. And collectors love that. Now here's where it gets interesting. The 1940 nickel also offers a few notable errors and varieties. One that gets talked about a lot is the repunched mint mark, especially on the 1940 S. You'll see the S doubled or slightly off-center, often due to the manual hand-punching process used at the time. These don't always bring massive premiums, but for variety collectors, they add depth to the hunt. Some examples in high mint state can command $150 to $400 depending on eye appeal and visibility. Another fun error is the off-center strike, where the design is misaligned, usually due to a planchet not being properly centered during striking. These can vary widely in value, depending on how dramatic the error is and how much of the design remains visible. A nicely off-center 1940 nickel in mint state can fetch several $100s. More if it also has full steps or a unique planchet anomaly. And let's not forget die cracks and cuds. These minting flaws, where part of the die breaks and leaves a raised area on the coin, are becoming more desirable among error collectors. They're not often documented in the older series like this, so when they show up, they tend to generate excitement. One lesser-known but intriguing fact about the 1940 nickel is how many survive in high condition, especially proof strikes. That year marked only the second time since 1916 that the U.S. Mint produced proof coins again, and collectors responded. Over 15,000 proof nickels were struck in Philadelphia in 1940, and many of them were well preserved. A PR67 example can go for $300 to $400, while PR68 or better may exceed $1,000, particularly if it has strong cameo contrast. Cameo and deep cameo finishes didn't exist as formal designations back then, but modern grading services apply them retroactively. So when a 1940 proof nickel shows that frosted design against a mirrored field, it grabs attention and dollars. Collectors who specialize in early proof coins keep a close eye on this year, because it was part of that first reintroduction wave of modern proofs, and supply is limited. One of the most compelling things about collecting the 1940 Jefferson nickel is how approachable yet rewarding it is. You can start with circulated pieces for pocket change, but you can also chase high-grade rarities and condition standouts that rival much more famous coins in value. It's a great example of how historical context, strike quality, and collector demand can combine to elevate a coin's importance well beyond its face value. And for those who enjoy storytelling through coins, this one doesn't disappoint. The 1940 nickel circulated through gas stations, diners, and grocery stores as the country crept toward global conflict. It passed through countless hands during an anxious moment in American history. Holding one today, especially a well-preserved example, feels like holding a small piece of that history in your palm. So whether you're drawn to it for its wartime proximity, its era potential, or its high-grade value, the 1940 Jefferson nickel is a coin that earns its respect. It bridges the past with the present and offers a ton of collecting depth. Now, as we step back and look at the 1977, the mysterious 1975, and the enduring 1940 nickels, a clear picture starts to emerge. These coins aren't just about metal and mint marks. They're about stories, scarcity, and the thrill of discovery. Each one represents a different kind of rarity, whether it's a stunning error, a missing date, or a conditioned gem hiding in plain sight. And that's exactly what makes collecting so endlessly rewarding.